Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear,
business consultant.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.
Welcome. I'm Jay Shear with Jay Shear Business Consulting. We build solid foundations for service-based businesses to grow and scale and achieve the results and success they deserve. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. Are you a high performer? Are you interested in leveling up in life and leadership? What behaviors, habits, and skills does it take to become a high performer? Well, on this episode, we're going to explore these questions and more. Our guest is a former science teacher who for 20 years has been using his teaching skills to help leaders simplify and solve complex problems. He's a coach, trainer, and advisor who works with leaders at the highest level to become exceptional in all they do. In addition, he hosts the Orson Wells Show, a show designed to inspire and train you to go out, crush your biggest goals, and be exceptional. Please welcome Orson Wells. Orson, thank you so much for being here today. It's great to see you.
Jay, thanks for having me. I'm excited about this show, excited about our conversation today.
Absolutely, as am I. And this is the topics that we're going to be talking about today are those that really are at the top of my list of things that I'm interested in. Anytime we get to talk about leadership and being exceptional and looking at ways to improve in different areas of both business and life, I'm right there, and I get fired up about those. So, so let's first start with a bit of your backstory. So you and I had an opportunity to have a conversation a while back, and you had shared with me that you're actually a teacher at your core, and that you started out as a high school science teacher.
Yes.
So what did you learn through that experience that you carry with you today?
I think one of the main things, well, first of all, one of the things I really believe in is catering to your strengths in everything that you do. And so one of the things that I learned, first of all, about myself is that, like you said before, that at my core, I'm a teacher. I enjoy helping somebody go from point A to point B or Z, and really helping them learn, develop, and grow in that process. And so that's one of the things I've seen over my life. And so when I look at someone's life, whether kind of in a coaching setting, we're talking about what do you want to do with your life? What are those themes that go across your life? And so for me, I went into the education field, maybe in the wrong area, but at my core, I am a teacher. I love to teach. And so that's one of the biggest lessons that I learned just mostly about myself. As far as like when you think about kind of technique or anything like that, is that when you are, one of the things I've picked up as a teacher is you got to meet people where they are. Now, I had in my teaching, I taught junior high and high school. I had kids in class. I'll never forget. I had a parent come to me, a mother, and I think I was teaching 7th grade life science at the time. And her son was in my class, and this is not a for drugs or not drugs, but she didn't want to put him on the ADHD drugs, I think Ritalin or something like that. And she said, but he's very hyperactive. He always needs something to do. And, one of the things I said, and she was just kind of giving me, that's your fair warning. It was kind of one of those things. That's your fair warning. And, and so I knew going in that with this young man, I had to do something to keep him busy because he was extremely intelligent, but he had an appetite for knowledge and to accomplish. He'd do his homework before it's due. Once he figured out the pattern of the homework, you've answered these questions at the back of the chapter, he'll have them done. And so I always had something prepared for him to do, during class, whether it was, the class time work that we did during the instruction. He would be, helping me give instruction or doing an activity. but I tried to meet him where he was at, because, and that's what I found was successful in that pattern, in that at that stage. And what I found over time is that's kind of true for all of us in the way that we learn, in the way that we grow and develop. You've got to find a way, especially as a teacher, especially as someone that's trying to help someone else, is how can you design this information to really reach them where they're at, so that you can then create change in their life. And so whether you're talking about seventh grade science or you're talking about life in general, it's about crafting the message in a way that, people can really relate to it and understand it, and then adapt it and change and grow and accomplish the goals that they have. And so, overall, so it was about what I learned about myself, but then also what I learned about how people really learn and grow.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that's such an important point, is understanding that we all learn different ways, and
Hmm.
being able to adapt your style to that person's learning style, and being
Absolutely.
self-aware enough about that. So the example that you gave with this particular student, I think that's a fantastic example to show your flexibility, your ability to be able to teach under really all different types of circumstances, because we're all different. We all have different
Yeah.
personalities, different styles, and to be able to connect with not only a student in a school setting, but then let's apply that to business, being able to connect the right way to a
Yeah.
client. And as you said, meet them where they are.
Yeah. I was just going to say, Jay, it's funny you say that, because oftentimes in my, over the span of my career, I've gotten warnings about working with someone. Well, if you go and work with this individual, they're really tough, and they withhold information. And this would be me, a colleague warning me about working with a leader and how I can, going in to help them. But it was one of those, it goes back to that lesson that I learned about adapting to, like you said, personalities and how people learn, and how they see things. So how can I adjust my style to really help that leader, help that individual with the information that they need? How can I advise them and give them good information if I can't reach them? They may have been difficult for someone, with someone else, but how can I connect with them in a way where maybe they weren't being difficult? Maybe it was a building trust issue that was there. So how can I build trust with that individual? And that's one of the things that I really learned. And it almost sounds like a book title. Everything I know I learned in teaching seventh grade science, but it's not necessarily true, but it's somewhat true. I learned a lot in that from those experiences.
Yeah, I love that. I think back when you mentioned about, working with someone that's a challenge, or someone trying to at least share with you, hey, you may not want to work with this person because it's a challenging situation. That's the one that I want to gravitate toward, because
Oh,
that's the
absolutely.
one. Yeah, because that's the one where someone else has done their best, but maybe they just didn't have the right tool set or the flexibility and approach to be able to connect with that person. So I hold that one up as an opportunity
Yes.
to see what I'm capable of doing and give me an opportunity. So yeah, that's good. So what words would you use then to describe yourself?
I think for me, one of the most common thing, if I get that question about what are your strengths, or what are you describe yourself, it's resilient. I think I've been resilient over the course of my life. I don't necessarily have kind of that, dramatic story or that story arc in life where something, dramatic happened, but there's been issues, there's been different things in my life where, you have different setbacks, but I've always managed to come back from those things. Whether it was, growing up, you deal with self-esteem issues. Years ago, I had an accident, and I would a little accident where I tore all the ligaments in my left leg, in my left knee, and had to have all of that surgically repaired. And from day one, it was a process of me really finding confidence in myself to kind of go through that entire process. So I attribute two things. Number one, I thank God for giving me the the resilience to go through that process. But after three surgeries and about a year of rehab, I was able to come back from that. And that's kind of something physical. But I think a lot of times we deal with a lot of different issues in life where, or me personally, where you've had to be resilient. I started working with doing leadership development, organizational development when I was like about 25 years old. And so at the time, and this is not true anymore, but at the time, most of the people I was working with were twice my age. And so what is this 25-year-old kid doing teaching people about leadership or training or communication or, all of those different things? But after a lot of bumps in the road, it was about how do you stick with something that you really want to do and grow through all of the challenges. And I think that's something that I've really been able to do over the course of my life. So if I was going to describe myself in one word, that was a long way to say, it's resilient.
Powerful, but I'm glad you gave that example. And let's go back to that example, because I'd love for you to unpack for us the process that you went through, because that takes it takes deep work, right? It takes overcoming those limiting beliefs, overcoming the story that we're telling ourselves. And I went through a somewhat of a similar situation very early in my career, where I was younger than most of the others that were in a management position in the company that I was in. And there were times that I would show up and I believed in myself and I knew that I was capable, but I was questioning as I would look around, and I started to tell myself certain stories like, do I belong here? Why, do I have the experience yet to be able to perform at the same level as these other individuals that are 1.5 to 2 times my age at that point? So walk us through what that process was like for you, because I am sure that there are many others that are listening right now that have experienced that or are in the middle of that right now, trying to figure out, well, how do I work through it?
Well, I think the first thing is exactly what you said, is believing in yourself, that you deserve to be there, you belong you have a seat at the table, so to speak, in a lot of those cases, because your belief in yourself, if you don't believe you belong there, guess what? You're gonna act like you don't belong there. And that's really, but then the other thing is really then wanting to learn, being open to learn from your mistakes. So kind of like I said before, at my core, I'm a teacher, but being a teacher, you also have to learn. And so also within my core is my thirst for knowledge, to learn. And so what I really did, and I think one of the things, for everyone listening, and I think one of the core of resilience is always asking yourself, how can I learn from my mistakes? How can I learn from my setbacks? Even how can I learn sometimes from my own lower self-esteem? And because all of those things, I believe, sends you a message, gives you a message about yourself that you can course correct, that you can learn from for when you try again. Because oftentimes people, find themselves in some type of setback, and the first thing they don't want to do is try that again. But they don't want to try it again because they don't know how to do it different, because they don't ask themselves the question of, what can I learn from this particular experience? When I was first starting out, I taught, and I went to this emotional intelligence certification. And we had this, this was, I was working for a company then, and I went through all of this training for emotional intelligence. And then one of the very first times I went to talk about emotional intelligence in leadership was to a group of psychiatry residents. And so let me paint that picture a little bit for you, for those of you listening that may not understand this. So I was talking about emotional intelligence and how your brain is wired for emotion and amygdala hijacks and all of these things. And then how do you use key words to communicate and connect with people? And I was taking that and going to speak to a group of individuals who've just spent 4 years in undergrad, probably in biology or psychology or something, another 4 years in med school, learning far more than I know about the body, then another set of years in residency practicing psychiatry. I might have said psychology before, but I meant psychiatry, so they can prescribe meds. So they're the best of the best, going to be these future physicians. And so I'm going to them to really, my mission was to talk about emotional intelligence and leadership, because anytime you're a physician in a clinic, you're a de facto leader. You are a leader within there, even if you may not have that leadership title. But I went in there and they started to ask me about, what's the research behind this? Where'd you cite your resources? And I just fumbled through this entire presentation. And the best thing that was that I needed to happen at that point was for the clock to tick to the end when we were out of time, because I couldn't get out of there fast enough. And it was like, as professionally, it was one of the worst experiences I had at that time, or I felt like I had, because I looked foolish in front of these really smart people. And I spent most of my career in organizational development, leadership development, working with doctors and even engineers and all of that. But this was my first lesson. This is my first time kind of out of the gate teaching a topic that I should be very versed in. And I was challenged so much by that process. So I went back and I talked to the guy that I reported to, my director. He's actually, I consider him a mentor. He's the guy that gave me an opportunity in this field, the very first opportunity in this field, making the transition from education into organizational development and leadership development. And this is where I think I began to learn how to be resilient. Is when I went back to him and I explained to him everything that happened and how bad I felt about everything. He asked me, he said, okay, so what'd you learn? He had this way of saying it. He'd say, so what'd you learn? And then we started talking about it. I said, well, maybe for every presentation, I need to make sure I have all the sources cited and where I got the information, and maybe I should study a little bit more before I go in. And so I went through this whole list of things that I learned. He made me kind of say, he kept asking me, okay, what'd you learn? Okay, what else? What else did you learn? What else did you learn? And it's through that learning process, I think, that I first begin to realize how to be resilient. Now, we can be resilient by accident. We just have this determination to overcome a challenge. But there's something different when you learn how to be resilient, because oftentimes there's times in our lives where we don't feel like it. And so what I've learned is how to be resilient on purpose, and taking the time to say, what did I really learn from this? And then you ask yourself those questions, and then based on that new information, what do I do the next time? What do I do when I'm ready to try this again? And really, I believe that's really the essence of resilience, because when you can learn through even the most difficult of circumstances, you can always go back and say, and try it again. And, even if sometimes the answer is I'm not doing that again, there's probably some times that's the answer. In this case, in many cases, when you're talking about our professional life and those kinds of things, that's maybe not the case, but there's probably other areas of life where you say, I won't do that again. But definitely it is an opportunity. I always think of resilience as an opportunity to learn. And I think that's really where it starts.
I love that example. And I love the way that you frame that. And like most things that happen to us or for us in both life and business, those things that push us to the edge or outside of our comfort zone are really the opportunities that allow us to grow as human beings, that allow us to grow in our professional capacity. So the example that you cited, although it was a very uncomfortable situation for you at that time, the learnings that came out of that, there would have been no other way to be gifted with that opportunity than for you to actually experience it firsthand. You can't read about those things in a book. You can't watch those on a video. We have to go through that. And the fact that you were able to walk away from that, have a conversation with someone that you trusted, who was a mentor, and who was able to help you reflect back on that situation the right way. And I look at that line of questioning really as like the Socratic method, right? Just continuing to peel back the layers. So What did you learn from that? What else did you learn? What could you have done differently, right? Just continuing to drill down until you've peeled back as much as you can. And I love that process of going through, what can we do to become more resilient? And I think that's a great example that you've given. So what was the catalyst then? So you left teaching at the high school level, let's say. What was the catalyst for actually starting your own leadership coaching and consulting business?
Wow. I mean, that's a really great question. One, all of the years that I worked, especially in organization development, I worked for really great leaders. But there was a gap in there, and there was a gap in there for about 11 months. And see how I'm very specific with this. It wasn't even a whole year, but for about 11 months, almost 11 months to the day, that I worked for a very poor leader, very bad leader. Now, picture it. all of my career, I've worked for either moderately good leaders to very exceptional leaders, and I've worked with great teams. But for those 11 months, I worked for someone that was, to this day, is probably the worst leader that I ever encountered. Also, couple that with, over the course of my career, I've worked with teams who've told me, our leader is just so bad, or they do this, they micromanage us, they do all of these things, they say one thing, they're never here, they don't communicate well, they don't set expectations, we don't know what they want, and they'll say all of these things. And from a professional cognitive sense, I knew what they were talking about. But then I got to experience it myself for 11 months working for this bad leader, and this was a few years ago. And so I started to think about, the concept that we spend so much time in our professional lives working with leaders, and all of that, it trickles into our home life. It impacts what happens at home, in our personal relationships, and it impacts, whether you have children or whoever's in your house. It impacts everyone, even if you're there by yourself. So I just want to include everyone in that. And so I just began to think about this thing that no one should really work for a bad leader. No one should work for a bad leader. And because part of what I see is that if I can help leaders lead at their highest level, optimize their ability to lead and empower their team and encourage their team and create this environment where people really want to work, then I can, for me personally, that gives me a sense of making a difference in this world. Because then individuals can go to work, spend that, 8 to 12 hours, it depends on what field you're in, 8 to 12 hours at work. And then when they get home, they're having conversations about, what happened at work, and they come home, and although it's been stressful, and although they've been working hard probably at work, their emotional state is better, their confidence is better, they feel good about themselves. The last thing they're worrying about is their boss, their leader, being that problem in their life. Maybe their boss or their leader is more of a solution or a help in their life. So that's really what driven me to say that, I want to expand my ability to help and reach leaders, really, I would just say around the world, be better leaders, because every leader has an exponential impact on the lives of other people. So, whether you're the CEO of a company or a frontline leader in a manufacturing plant, you have an exponential impact on it's not only just your life, but it's the life of every single person that works for you, in a sense. And so that's the biggest driver for me for doing that. And I wanted to take all the 20 years I've been doing this and really use it and direct it to help people.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So true about what you just stated. And there's two things that I wanted to comment on. One of those is that we do not need a title or a business card that says leader or sales manager or any other like title to be a leader. we demonstrate our leadership capabilities throughout life, whether it's as a son, a father, a spouse. It doesn't matter. There's always opportunities to show up in a leadership capacity in a role. And there's always opportunities to improve as a leader. And, I'm thinking about you collecting all of these data points, right? Hearing all of these stories from different people that you were around about these bad leadership examples and collecting all of that information and then figuring out, okay, there's an opportunity here to be able to solve some big challenges in a big pool, right? So lots of opportunity there. So give us a bit of feedback then on the experience you had with this bad leader. So you mentioned about micromanaging, but what are some of the characteristics that you personally experienced of a bad leader, and how did that make you feel?
Are you talking about my personal experience or some of the stories?
Yeah. So I want to hear about your personal experience, because you said you experienced, there was an 11-month period, right? You experienced a bad leader. What were the characteristics of this bad leader? What made them a bad leader? And then how did that make you feel as someone that was reporting to this individual?
Absolutely. So one of the things that came off the bat, and I like this example because I have several examples that are things that I experienced with other leaders as well as with this specific individual. One of the things that I always get upset about is that when someone sets that bad example, when they're a poor example for the team, when it's kind of that environment where it's, do as I say, not as I do. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I believe, for leaders, and one of the most characteristic things of what we'll just say a bad leader is that when they set an expectation for others that they themselves don't follow. And so in my specific example, when this leader first came into our team, and we were a very tight-knit, close team, and we worked well together. Everyone got along really well. I would consider us, we were a high performing team that probably needs some adjustment. I would say that we probably needed some help, probably needed some direction in different things. But he came in and really just said, hey, everyone, I'm really about teamwork. I'm really about all of us working together and collaborating, and he said all of the right things. And within the first 30 days, and when I say all of the right things, that I'm collaborative. I want to hear what you have to say. I value your input. I respect you as individuals. I know you all have long tenure here and been working and doing these things. So I have so much to learn from you. And so within the first 30 days, you could have just, if we bulleted all of those things on a list and just said, what's the opposite of that? The behaviors that he exhibited were actually the opposite of that. And one of the things when I was experiencing that experience, it was more so of, well, he said this and is now doing this. It's very different. And it was more so from that emotional response of, I had this expectation that we were going to be collaborative and talk about things and share experiences and learn and grow and make, collaborative decisions about which direction we go. So one of the first things he instituted when he came in was I believe he read Good to Great, but then stopped at this point. I think this isn't Good to Great. The not to do list, or created the not to do list. And so we had this long list of things that we were not going to do anymore, and it stopped there. So we didn't know what we were supposed to do. We just knew what we were not supposed to do. And so that's just one brief example. But my overall point here is that we went from an expectation of having collaboration and working together and this really team focused area into one that was not collaborative, where it was now turned into a dictatorship. And he said, don't do this, but didn't really give us a vision for what we were supposed to be doing. So we went through this whole transition phase for probably about 45 to 60 days, just trying to figure out what are we doing now and how is the department changing. And the reason that always rubs me the wrong way is because I believe that we even as adults, and I have experience teaching kids and adults, is that we play follow the leader. We follow the example that's set for us. And so while we were more of a team that's been working together, so this didn't impact us as much at first, but we saw this example in front of us that was not lining up with what we had discussed that we were going to be as a team. And so you have this conflicting messages going back and forth that does not create a good culture, because everything you do as a leader impacts the culture of the organization. And so if you as a leader is non-collaborative and more of a dictator, those same things are going to trickle down into the culture of the organization and cause the team to have a lack of collaboration. And without even a crystal ball, you can guess what some of the things that begin to happen. There begin to be breakdowns within the team as the things go on, as everyone was trying to figure out what do we do. There was no vision. There was a poor example of leadership in the beginning. And so we really struggled there for a little while as to what we were going to do as a team, to really come together and to, make the situation even more, to illustrate a little bit more. Couple of the members of the team were eligible for retirement within the organization, and they took the opportunity to retire. And so it became something that it totally was not at first. They had been eligible for retirement for about 3 or 4 years, but decided at that point that this is not for me. And it was all because there was a leader that really didn't set the standard of what they wanted. And so for me as well, that's when I started thinking about, okay, what am I going to do next? Where am I going? And at that point I did make a decision to leave that organization. But it was that transition, and it started with that leader setting that bad example of what we were expected to do within the team.
And so here, Orson, is another example or another experience that has been given to you to be able to learn through. So here you spent this time around someone who was not demonstrating good leadership skills, right? And setting the right type of examples, building a strong culture, coaching and encouraging, and building a collaborative environment. And so you were able to experience firsthand and get the feeling of what happens when you don't have strong leadership in place. So again, it's one of those things that as you look back now, had you not had that experience, you wouldn't have had that information from an experiential standpoint to be able to work with clients and be able to help them through that type of scenario. So that's a really interesting one. I appreciate you sharing that. So today in your coaching and consulting business, what would you say are the top 2 or 3 challenges that you most often see with your clients?
Well, I'll go back to the answer that go back to this whole theme about, setting the example or setting the standard as a leader. And a lot of the biggest challenge around that is about self-awareness. Of how am I impacting my team, and how am I showing up as a leader, and how is my performance impacting my team's ability to do their job, to do that. And a lot of times what I've found is that leaders don't have the self-awareness to say, how am I impacting the environment? And in many cases, that's where you start. When I coach an individual, it's more so, okay, let's talk about, let's kind of, unpack and figure out. And I use different tools to do that. Sometimes it's a behavioral assessment. There's different other, assessments and different things that you can do to actually start. I use those to start the conversation, but oftentimes it's about building that self-awareness. Are you aware of how your communication style? Let's not even get into the technical things that you're doing yet. let's talk about communication style, how you're interacting with your team, what you're saying, what you're not saying, what you're focusing on, what you're not focusing on. And then how are all of those things impacting your team to now do their job? Because it has some type of impact. But if you don't have the self-awareness to really ask yourself those really great questions, then you're not going to be able to make the right adjustments.
So I want you to keep going down this trail, but I want to interject one thing here very quickly,
Yes.
and that is for everyone that is listening to this conversation right now, please take notes on this particular section. There's some great information that's already been shared to you, but self-awareness is so incredibly important. And Orson, as you're continuing to take us down this path, share with us some tools, some practical tools that our audience can put into practice themselves to become more self-aware. So think about it as if you're sitting in front of a client right now and you're having this conversation. And here are some very specific things that you can do to become more self-aware. Go ahead and continue. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. So, and I'll answer. And to answer that question, I think we have to understand one thing first as a leader, but even just as an individual. One of the things you mentioned before is that we lead even without titles. We lead, if you're a parent, you're leading. If you're, a group of friends, there's a leader. There's leadership in all of those different things. But one of the things that's true about no matter where you're leading, how you're leading, is that when there's stress, when there's pressure, when there's challenges, the real you is going to show up. And I think that is what sometimes leaders don't understand is, if you go back into 2020 and we look at all of the challenges that we all went through during that time, I kind of think of sometimes the challenges are a gift to a leader that's taken the time to develop themselves as a leader. Because then all of those things, all of those lessons that you learned is what's going to come up, and you're going to put those things into practice. But for someone that did not take the time to build their self-awareness and their technical leadership skills, then those things aren't going to come up, and you're going to react out of emotion or out of the immediate need and not be able to think strategically. So one of the best things that I think that leaders could really do is, and I said it, I'll actually already answer the question, but I'm going to come back to it. It's asking yourself, and you can do two things with this. You can ask yourself, how is my performance impacting the performance of my team? And it's a very simple question, but you've got to really sit with it for a minute and really think about, how is my performance in how I communicate, how I present the vision, how I delegate, do I delegate at all, how I reward and recognize, how is my performance as a leader impacting that, how I communicate. If I communicate just direct and always, if it's always direct and it's just if I'm a dictator, how is that impacting my team? If I'm very soft on communication and I'm not always clear with what I'm wanting to say, and I say, well, we may be able to do this, or we could try to do this, and I'm not very clear, how is that impacting my team? So it's asking yourself some of the to gain some self-awareness. And one of the things you do there is really just go back and think about, what did that last team meeting look like? What did that last conversation look like? What did I say? What did I not say? That's one way to do it. And that's kind of one level of self-awareness to gain. To take it to another level, to take that same practice or skill to another level, is go and ask someone else. Go and ask a member of your team that, and if you've never done this, they might be terrified when you ask them, but go and ask a member of your team is, how is my performance as a leader impacting your ability to do your job well? And then really listen for that answer, because within that answer, they're going to give you, it'll be like gold on what you should continue to do, what you should stop doing, all of those things, what you should start, kind of a start, stop, continue exercise. What are those things that I should be doing or not doing that's really helping? What's actually pushing the needle a bit forward? Because oftentimes, and I've worked in big corporate organizations, and so oftentimes they rely on like 360 surveys, where they're, and they're maybe electronic. I've actually done them by interview before, but that's a whole nother story for another time, another interview. But one of the best ways to get that feedback from your team is to go to them directly and ask them, how is my performance impacting your ability to perform at your highest level? And then taking the time to really, really listen to what they have to say, because you'll find, I think it'll transform the way you lead when you start asking those types of questions.
Yeah, be prepared for the feedback that you're going to receive. And you just made a very, very important point, is to be open to the feedback, listen, actively listen, and use that feedback as an opportunity to learn, as an opportunity to improve. And I would just share that the method at which we use to ask questions kind of goes back to what you were sharing a few minutes ago when we were talking about the mentor that you had. So tell me, what did you learn from this? And continuing to ask questions to drill down. The same thing would apply here. So when you're asking for feedback, keep peeling back the layers, right? Keep asking those questions, because sometimes if you're asking a question to evaluate my performance as a leader, the person that you're speaking with, they may, depending on the individual's personality, they may be a bit uncomfortable answering that question. I mean, here's my boss sitting across from me asking me for feedback. And so it sometimes takes a little bit for that comfort level to start to really come to the surface. And the more questions you can ask, you can really start to uncover and get to the root, right? Get to the truth. And if you're coming from a place of really wanting to learn, wanting to improve, wanting to learn how I can help you be more successful, then they're more apt to share the information with you. And I love that approach.
Yeah. And you're right. I mean, and that's one of the things that I've learned is that also is, I think I said a little bit about it, is that if you're doing something like this for the first time with your team, they might be terrified of the whole process. So you're absolutely right. You may not get as good information the first time as you will maybe the fifth or sixth time. So it is something that you've got to warm them up to, because depending upon the culture of your organization or your team, it might be their first thought might be, am I about to get fired? So it might go all the way to there. So it is kind of warming them up to the idea of answering those questions. And also another way that you could frame it to make it almost a little bit turn down to the dial down a little bit is, how can I support you more in your role? And that'll give you a little bit information. It's not so personal. It's more so about them now, but how can I support you more in your role would be another way to begin to have these conversations with your team. And so, depending upon the individual that when I'm working with someone, we walk through that process of what's going to be most appropriate for how do you approach your team with those types of questions, because it needs to be tailored to the environment. So if you've been a dictator your whole leadership career, then we've got some work to do. If you've been a little softer and you've had really great conversations, then we've got to manage the level of input that you get. So there's challenges on both ends of it. So great point.
Yeah, but some excellent tools that you've shared. I love the self-reflection piece, right? Being able to look back at the end of a day or even at the end of an exchange that I've had with someone. So how did that go? Did I add value to the situation? Was I listening? Was I interested in what the other person had to say? Was I providing clear and actionable information, something that they could actually take and work with? All of those sorts of things. So you've given some excellent tools there. And again, for all of you that are listening right now, please make sure that you're writing these things down, because there are some great nuggets here that, when applied, are going to help you and are helping me in improving on our leadership skills and our ability to be more effective leaders. So,
Right.
Excellent. So what then, let's talk about high performing leaders and high performing teams. So in the work that you do, can you share maybe some of the characteristics of high performing leaders? And you've already touched on several of these, but I want to be able to put these in a very tangible list, if you will, that our listeners can start to pay attention to and identify, how do I rank on these different areas?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've been walking through that process. And so what I've developed is, and this has just been over time, this is a combination of things that I've learned over the years about leadership. And it's just this framework of leadership. And, the funny thing is, the first one is about setting the standard, is that as the leader, I like the John Maxwell quote that's, everything rises and falls on leadership. And I think that's so true. Of course, there's some caveats and there's some side conversations that we can have about that. But when you think about it in a broad, general sense, is the way the leader goes, the organization goes, in a lot of ways, and how they lead, how they interact, how do they cast vision for the team? All of those things come into play. Their behavioral style, communication style, all of those things, how do they influence? Do they inspire confidence? Do they set the example that they want everyone in the organization? Of course, they want everyone to be individuals and all of those things, but are they showing respect in how they communicate? Are they inclusive as a leader? Are they doing some of those things? So that would be the first thing about the leader, is setting the standard. And, going back to some of our early conversation, that starts with a high level of self-awareness. The more self-aware you are as a leader, the better standard you're going to set for those that are following you. Because remember, they're following you. So they're going to follow the leader in a lot of cases. And so the second thing that I really look at is, and this is kind of just even the framework that I coach in to a certain degree, is about, creating a shared vision. Because one of the things that a high performing leader does is recruit people into the vision of the organization, and helping them find value and their values in the mission of the organization. And that doesn't matter what field you're in, what industry you're in, but does that person feel valued as a strong member of the team, like they're contributing? And it's not that they have to fulfill their entire life dreams there, as much as they have to see themselves as part of that overall vision. And so whether you're building widgets, or you're in healthcare, or whatever it is, how do you create this vision? And one of the things here is that when I talk about this, and I try to steer leaders away from this, because I learned this working with an organization. It's not a vision statement. Hire the marketing team and craft a vision statement. That'll be great. Do that. It's more so, what are those things what are we going after as a team? One of the training teams that I managed years ago, one of the things that I always told them was, I always put this in front of them. I said, always add value. And so every training session, add value. Every coaching session, add value. How do you add additional value? So we would talk about that. And that's all. That was the vision. Is the vision, the thing that we are here to do is add value. And then why I steer away from a vision statement is because a lot of times it's not talking about that the CEO of the company with the vision for the company. It's that frontline leader. It's that mid-level leader that's saying, how do I now put the vision of the company for my team? It's really, what is that team here to do? And, and it could be different things. So it's really about having that vision that's very clear. What are we here to do? But then also, why would others want to enroll in that vision and be part of what you're doing as a team? And the next part of that is creating clarity. And I love this one because it's something I talk about all the time. And the reason I kind of put this in here is because most of the problems that, if you think about in your personal life, professional life, and if you look on the TV now and look at politics, you look at anything, most of our problems are a result of a lack of clarity. Think about that. Most of our problems are a result of a lack of clarity. So Jay, you and I were talking about something, we were negotiating something, and you weren't being clear in your messages to me. I wasn't being clear in my messages to you. We weren't being clear what we wanted in the conversation. It's going to cause problems. And the same thing happens. So a high performing leader creates clarity almost at every opportunity. What are their intentions? What do they hope to see? What do they not want? What do they want? What are their concerns? You always want to create clarity, especially when there's change in the organization, when there is dynamics and shifting within the organization. I think back to last year, of course 2020 is going to be a marker for every single person on the planet. Sure. To some degree. And when things were, are we working from home? How long are we working from home? Are we going to lose our jobs? If we are losing our job, what's going to happen next? Or is the company going to support? It's about creating clarity, because where there's clarity, there's always comfort. Now, clarity doesn't mean a good message all the time, but it means clarity, so that now I know what to do. And a high performing leader creates clarity in the entire life cycle of business. No matter what we're talking about, that's one thing they do. And the next two is kind of related to clarity, is effectively challenge and change. One of the things a leader does is change the status quo of what's going on, challenge it a little bit, but how you challenge it is so important, because again, you're dealing with relationships. So having good conversations, how do you have those difficult conversations that need to come up? How do I say, Jay, the way you've been doing this for years is not working. How do I say that it's not working? You need to change this. How do I say that in a way that brings you along into the change? Because then that's the next part of it, is how do we effectively challenge and then change a process? And then the last thing really for high performing leaders is empowering others. And I thought clarity is important, but this is also one of my favorite ones, because it's really thinking about, how do I leverage the skills, the strengths of my team, help them grow and develop. And if you hire them because they had a certain set of skills, they had a certain level of expertise. So why not let them do that job? Empower them to do the job. We talked about micromanaging before. Let's not micromanage. Let's figure out a way to allow them to do their job. And then another part of this empowerment is also recognition. And I believe in recognizing effort and outcomes. And the reason I talk about that is because if I'm working for weeks and weeks on a project, I'm head down and I'm working hard, putting in a lot of effort. It'll be great to hear, hey, Orson, great job. I appreciate it. I see you working. I see you doing the work. I see you putting in the hour, whether it's hours or effort or what it is. And I'm recognizing that. But then when you get that outcome, I'm always then now rewarding that outcome that you have, whether it's I'm completing the sale, I'm completing the big year-end report, whatever that is. Then you're actually rewarding the outcome, because what happens a lot of times is we just recognize or reward the outcome. But if we don't also recognize the process to get that outcome, sometimes your morale suffers a little bit, because guess what? You're going to have some members of the team that maybe don't get to that outcome, but they put in all of the work, but there's other conditions that came in there. How can you effectively recognize those who put in all that effort, but maybe because of unforeseen circumstances didn't get the desired outcome? They were off. They didn't sell. They missed the sales mark by a percentage. Of course, that impacts sales, because then that's when we talk about reward for outcomes. And so, yeah, high performing leaders, they're really doing all of these things to really perform at a high level. And it's something that I believe in. It's a combination of things that I've learned over the years. And actually, even some of the training I do is built around this whole process.
Well, you can tell this is an area that you are incredibly passionate about. I mean, you've got me lit up just hearing you talk about it and seeing the excitement or hearing the excitement in your voice. And again, I'm going to reach out to those that are listening right now. So I would love when you have an opportunity to listen to this to comment and let us know of the framework that you just heard, what resonates most with you? What really gets you excited? And what's the area within that framework that you believe you could benefit the most by honing your skills on? So comment on that for us, please. Let us know what your thoughts are. I think that's outstanding. So I wanted to ask you before I get to my final question, share with us where we can connect with you directly. Where can we go to consume your content? We didn't even get a chance to talk about your podcast. So we're going to be scheduling around too, because there's other areas that I really want to dig into with you that we can unpack that I think is going to provide even greater value to our audience. So where can we go to connect? How can we listen to your podcast and consume more of your amazing content?
Awesome. Well, of course, you can find me anywhere on social media, Instagram, Facebook at theorsonwells.com, or that's my website actually, but at the Orson Wells are all my social media handles on Instagram, Facebook, as well as, of course, LinkedIn, those types of things. And then my website is theorsonwells.com. And, I try to keep those things updated as we all try to do. And so, I have some things coming up and opportunities for development coming up pretty soon. So if you'd just enjoy what you've heard and want to learn more, that's where you can reach me.
Fantastic. Well, we'll certainly link to those areas in the show notes, and I'm really excited to see what you're going to be continuing to put out and share with all of us. And I would also just make a comment to everyone that Orson is prolific about putting content out, always putting videos out, always putting great nuggets of information in very clear, concise forms. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely check him out. Some great stuff. So here is my final question to you. Orson, what's one of the most valuable lessons that you've learned from a client that you didn't expect at the time?
Wow, that is a great question. You make me think about questions. I usually can answer questions right off the bat. I'd go back to the lesson on resilience. On resilience. Again, I have my own experiences with being resilient over the course of my life. And one of the things that I learned from an executive that I was coaching, and at the time, this individual was potentially in danger of losing their position. They were challenged, but it was kind of multiplied by the fact that they were also having challenges in their personal life. And one of the things that, and why a lot of times, and you'll hear, whether it's on my podcast, I'll talk about life and leadership. Because I don't think you can be really a great leader when things in your life are out of balance, when you're having challenges there. I think we all suffer, no matter what our sphere of influence is, when we have challenges in our personal life. And so it's about balancing that. But it was just watching this individual go through those challenges and essentially bounce back from where they were. It wasn't necessarily anything they said as much as it is what they did. And one of the things that one of the things I even talk about all the time is just showing up. And this individual just began to show up. We had some conversations, of course, we did some coaching and all of that fun stuff. But it was just that their desire to show up every single day and try to, give their best every single day. And being able to sit on the sidelines and watch that, when you consider looking at when you look at someone that oftentimes we look at, what are their clients, and get to work with some amazing people, very smart people that have a lot of responsibility over multi-million-dollar companies or departments and those kinds of things. And in some ways, when you work in a corporate environment, for all of us, we almost idolize that individual if they've done something special to get there. But when I saw this person struggle through, but then continue to show up every day, that really spoke to me on a personal level. And number one, helped me to see the impact that I can make personally, but then also it was a personal lesson for me in that no matter sometimes how how we're challenged in life, when we continually show up for in our family, when we continually show up for those that we work with, and in this individual's case, they're a leader of an within an organization, and they had people that were counting on them when they showed up for them, and they showed up. That meant something to every single person that they were working with, and it was just getting to see all of those things. And so I learned a tremendous deal out of that, is that sometimes in life, no matter how difficult our circumstances are, when we show up to that challenge and sometimes face it head on, even as ugly and difficult as it can be, it has an exponential reward as long as we keep showing up and making those improvements that we can, and kind of just staying in that fight, that we create a better outcome than if we didn't do that. And so that was a tremendous lesson to me, and something that I kind of take with me.
Powerful lesson. I appreciate you sharing that. Orson, thank you so very much for being here today and spending some time with us on Business Minds Coffee Chat. I'm just super grateful, and I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do this. And thank you for sharing of your knowledge and your experience and bringing so much value to our audience. So I appreciate you.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And for all of you, thank you for watching and listening. And please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a comment. Again, we would love it if you would share with us maybe one or two key takeaways. What connected with you? What did you learn from this episode? Share that. And also, please make sure that you share this with someone else who you think could benefit from the information that you received in this particular episode. To enjoy more episodes and to learn how Jay Shear Business Consulting can help build a solid foundation for your service-based business, just go ahead and visit jayshearbusinessconsulting.com. And until next time, keep learning and growing. Please use the strategies that were discussed today in this episode, and we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care.
Jay Shear Business Consultant.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.